Hello and welcome to Personal Paranormal Redux, The Woman in White. I'm sure many of you are confused with this video topic when I am most certain you were expecting to see the third entry in the New Zealand series involving haunted locations. Don't worry, it will be coming in the next upload, hopefully, fingers crossed, next week. I chose to make this video for two different reasons. First off, I love New Zealand and all of its lore, but I needed to take a quick break from it as I was starting to become overwhelmed. As you will see in the video when it is released, there are quite a large amount of locations that have significant hauntings. Honestly, more than I originally expected. The second and more prominent reason is that we have started to have an uptick in activity of one ghost in particular, and I wanted to bring the events to you as they are fresh in my mind. Some of you may already know a little bit about this, as I recently posted something on the topic on my Facebook. I honestly thought I might have been done with my Personal Paranormal series after my last one, but it seems the spirit world may not be done with me. So this is why I titled this with Redux. I want to mention that none of my encounters I talk about today are embellished or sensationalized in any way. I am open to any of your theories about what is going on, even if it is in a non-paranormal light. In other words, don't be afraid to share. That is, unless your theory involves alcohol or drugs, then maybe keep those ones to yourself. So without further delay, let's look at the woman in white that seems to enjoy my house. Through my life, I have had both the pleasure and displeasure of encountering many forms of spirits, which all started when I was around 8 years old. I won't go into what happened back then, as I previously went into it in great detail in a previous Personal Paranormal video. For the most part, none of my encounters have been as frequent as the one I am calling the woman in white. As a side note, I am a bit hesitant with calling it that, as the term is utilized in many locations around the world, to the point it is almost a catch-all phrase for a spirit sighting. However, as you will soon see, or should I say hear, it is the most accurate description. I would say for at least the past year and a half, the spirit has been making an appearance, and in a way I've been mentally documenting the encounters, but I really had no intention of mentioning anything about it publicly. Although, due to recent events, the visits have been piling up so much that I just felt the need to tell you about them, especially since many of you expressed an interest in hearing about my activity, either in my comment section or on my sadly rare live streams. Thinking back, my first realization that we had a female ghost in white came about one night a year and a half ago, as previously mentioned. I was downstairs all by myself watching TV or playing something on our Xbox One. After I was done, I proceeded to end my night the same way I always did, with letting our dogs outside to go to the bathroom, and then walking down our hallway to climb the stairs to go to our bedroom. At no point was I thinking about ghosts or anything paranormal. I was just focused on the stairs, and that our dogs were following behind me. Just to paint a picture, I'm also hoping to provide images of what I'm talking about, but in case I don't, our staircase has a handrail with long spindles where you can see through them into the living room and hallway. About midway up, something caught my eye through the spindles. It appeared that someone was walking down the hallway in the same direction I was walking, but only on the ground floor. I stopped and watched it for a second before seeing it disappear as it reached our kitchen entryway. What I saw was a woman with long dark brown hair, which reached to just under her shoulder blades. She was approximately 5'3" to 5'5" tall, and was dressed in a long, pure white gown that almost resembled nightgowns from the olden days. What was incredibly unnerving was that she seemed as tangible as if one of my daughters had been walking by. Not ethereal at all. So it is stated my daughters were asleep upstairs, as was my wife. I leaned over the banister to see if I could see anything, but nothing was there. I then took it a step farther and came back downstairs and searched for a possible intruder, but turned up empty-handed. This event was one of only 3 occasions in my life where a spirit sighting startled me, as I wasn't expecting it and it suddenly appeared just beside me. A few weeks went by without having another sighting of this being, so I started to forget it happened. Well, my computer is set up in what is basically our dining room, where the kitchen is to my back and our living room is to my right. One night, while probably working on one of my videos, I kept catching sight of something standing in the living room facing my direction. At first, I just wrote it off as nothing more than a trick of my eyes, as my wife's computer chair is a light tan color and in the same direction. But then I realized something wasn't right. This form was taller than the back of the chair and wasn't tan, but was pure white. I also began to notice it was the same form that I saw walking down the hall previously with the dark hair. Every time I looked over, it would disappear, but a few times I was able to move my head and eyes just slightly enough in its direction that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that what I was seeing was the same woman in white. At first it made me uncomfortable, but this type of visit became almost a nightly event where she would appear in the same spot, so I grew to ignore it. I just found it odd she would stand there watching me. No, staring at me. I never got a good look at her face, but from what I could tell, it wasn't scary looking, it would just seem like a normal appearance of a young female. Well, months went by with this same type of activity, and suddenly things changed recently. One night, my wife stayed up all night on my computer looking for a new fish tank for our beta on Amazon. When I got up for work at 3:30, I found her in my chair and I asked if everything was okay. She said yes, other than the fact that she was getting messed with. Her words. I asked if she saw the girl in white standing in the living room watching her, as it was a common occurrence for me, and she said no. She said while she was browsing Amazon, she kept hearing breathing behind her, and more disturbingly, the sound of someone cracking their knuckles right behind the chair. She also said that pretty much all night she kept hearing things being moved around in the living room, and on a few occasions even heard things falling to the floor. At one point she got up to check what had fallen, and nothing had been disturbed. I should note that while I'm away at work and the kids are away at school, and she's alone, she frequently tells me she hears something walking around upstairs, almost in a pacing fashion, up and down the hall. I would say a week after this event, I, again, was sitting in my chair watching a movie on our Xbox at night. I had a pair of headphones on, as I frequently do, so as not to keep everyone else awake. At one point I heard our stairs creaking slowly, as if someone was coming down them. At first I didn't think much about it, as the sound was the same as when my wife comes down them. At the time she had a distinct slow walk, since she had a bone spur on her heel, and she would take the stairs one slow step at a time. Well, I kept hearing the same slow creak of the wood of the stairs for longer than I thought it should have taken for her to come down them. I took one ear cup off my head to make sure of what I was hearing, and sure enough, the sound was accurate. I finally looked over to see if she needed help, and no one was on the stairs. I yelled out, "Hello? Honey, is that you?" And there was no response. I tried again, and was also met with silence. Finally I went over and looked up the stairs, and was met with nothing but emptiness. The next day I asked my wife if she had been up moving around, and she said no. While I physically didn't see the spirit making the noise, every fiber in my being knew it was the same woman in white. The event that was the final straw, and whether I was making a video about this topic, came about last week. I came home after work and went about my normal business of greeting everyone, including Chewy, putting my lunchbox away, and went upstairs to get a shower. When I came back down, I stood in the middle of the living room where I could see out our front door, as it was open since it's been really hot as of late. It was still fairly light out at this point. While standing there, I, clear as crystal, saw a woman in a white shirt with dark hair, and it appeared to be holding something white and oval shaped in her hand like a brush, walking along our sidewalk in a sort of bumbling fashion as if drunk. And as I watched, she turned towards her house, which looked like she was coming onto our porch. From my angle, I couldn't see her porch steps, but could certainly tell she was coming that way. Without looking at my wife, I said, "Oh, who is this coming to our door now?" She asked me what I meant, and I told her what I saw. I walked to the front door fairly quickly, and to my shock, no one was there. I then went outside and looked up and down our street, which is straight with no turns for a block and a half, and no one was there. Finally, I looked around our house thinking this person may have went that way, but again, found no one. That encounter left me baffled, as it was one of the few times that I saw a spirit in broad daylight and outside of our house. One thing I have noticed with this spirit, and it can be a bit annoying, is that it seems to randomly mimic my wife's voice crystal clear. Many times I would be downstairs and hear my wife calling for me or asking a question while she was upstairs, and when I would go to her, she would say it wasn't her, or even stranger still, she would be asleep, so it couldn't be her. Just the other day, this ghost took it to a new level. I went to get a shower and I left our dogs in the bedroom with my wife. While I was getting clean, I heard my dog, the mascot of this channel, Chewy, cry out in the fashion he does when he wants to get to me. When I asked my wife why Chewy was crying, she told me he wasn't, and I saw he was fast asleep on the bed. Now, I can't say this activity is the same spirit, but I do know only one has been fairly active as of late, so I assume it is causing this activity. I have tried to figure out where this spirit came from, since it wasn't present for years and only recently showed up. Outside of it just randomly coming to our house, I have a few possible theories. The first and most disturbing one is that it might be the same female ghost that became overly attached to me from our first house. This would be bad, since it became overly possessive and would terrorize my wife, mess with me in the shower, and at one time, even push me while I was walking up the stairs. Again, I mentioned this encounter in a previous Personal Paranormal video. The other thought is that for years, my wife's dad has had an encounter with a white woman in his house. One of the most fantastic stories from him was at one time when he was video chatting on his computer, alone in his house. The person he was talking to asked him who was in the house with him. When he said he was alone, and why were they asking, they said they saw on the video feed a woman dressed in white walking behind him in the other room. Freaky, I know, but I have to wonder if that same spirit didn't somehow follow us to our home. At this point, I am not sure who she is or what she wants, but I'll certainly keep you posted if anything else happens. I would love for someone who is more inclined to the spirit world than myself to offer their help in solving this mystery for me. At this point, she hasn't been aggressive, so I don't necessarily want her gone, but I'd love to know what she's about. I want to mention in closing this video that the whole time I was putting this together, I could feel her presence around me very strongly, to the point I was getting mild chills. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and I kept hearing walking and shuffling sounds behind me. At one point I even saw the shadow of what appeared to be a human head reflect off my computer tower, which is beside me, and it would only mean that it came from behind me. As funny as it sounds, as soon as it started picking up, I yelled out, "You need to knock it off. Regardless, I'm still telling your story." If you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this, as well as other paranormal things, cryptid topics, UFO encounters, and aliens. Also, I would greatly appreciate it if you would share my channel with someone you might think might enjoy this kind of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.